All right, we're going to go over basic grinding safety in this clip. This, again, covers the tools and equipment that we're currently using here at the school. I'm going to talk about basically powered grinders, whether that's noises, always noises, whether that be electric or battery powered. We have some pneumatic grinders in here. I'll do another video on pneumatic tools because there's differences there. But basically what we've got in the shop are either grinders that are battery powered, like this Milwaukee right here, or we have we have grinders that are corded. And again, this Milwaukee grinder, there's no wheel on it right now, has a cord. I'll talk to the corded ones first because it's important that you take the time to inspect the tool. You want to inspect every tool, but the cord really sees a lot of abuse, and it's one of those things that people don't check. At home, you might have a cord that's got some abrasion, little nicks and cuts, wrap it in electrical tape. That's not going to cut it here, okay? So if the cord is damaged, I'm going to take the grinder out of service. We'll get the cord replaced. And in fact, almost all of these have replacement cords. I don't know. This one still says Milwaukee on it, so there's one that has a factory cord. But most of these have got replacement cords. Get them at the local hardware store and we swap them out, or have the electrician swap them out for us. So we want to make sure that the grinder is checked out. If you pick it up, just give it a shake. It should be reasonably solid. There's going to be a little, if you can hear that, rattle within the tool. You want to make sure that the guard is rigidly attached. These guards here are quick release, so I can press a button on the side, and then that will allow me to rotate this to a different position to access whichever part of the wheel I need to access to do the work I'm doing. Maybe I need a little access to the left, or perhaps I need a little better access to the right to get into a corner. But that should be secure when it's in its operating position. In the case of this grinder right here, this is another Milwaukee grinder. Again, you can see that this has that tab, and you can see inside how this operates if you take the cover off. I would get familiar with these, right? Remove the parts. You've got nuts, we'll talk about those in a minute, that have to fit on top and or below, depending upon the wheel. So, the first time you use one of these, don't hesitate to, grab the wrenches, kind of take it apart, see what it looks like when it's operating normally, so you'll be familiar with it if it appears to be missing a part. Now, in terms of general use, what we have in the shop are 4.5-inch grinders, with the exception of the 7-inch Makita, which this is actually mine. It's not the school's, it belongs to me, but I don't really need it much at home, so it generally resides right here. In general, everything in here is 4.5-inch, so you don't have to worry about getting the wrong size wheel for the grinder. If you grab a grinding disc or a grinding wheel or a flap disc or a cutoff wheel or anything, it's going to be the correct size for the grinder, or it will be so obviously oversized that there's no way in heck it will fit. But the center hub on these grinders is a 5/8 11 thread, right hand. So that large wheel on that Makita grinder, the big 7-inch, will physically fit on this small grinder. But this wheel is not designed to operate at 10,000 RPM, which is how fast this one's turning. So to do that, the wheel would be overhanging the guard. It would be right on top of your fingers when you're operating it. And obviously, hopefully, really, really dumb thing to do, okay? So don't use the wrong wheel for your grinder. Don't remove the guards when you're grinding, because again, that grinding wheel is going to be close to your hand when it's in operation. And if that guard's not there and you're grinding and your hand slips, you just took your knuckles right off or your fingers off. So you always want to make sure that you have the guard on when that wheel is turning. Now this particular grinder has a very worn out cup type wire brush, and of course it is not behind the guard, but this of course wouldn't be behind the guard when it's attached to this type of grinder. This is for kind of specialty use only in the shop. I don't generally keep this out. But you know, essentially, as this is turning, I don't have a sharp edge hanging back on the rear when I'm using this to risk me cutting my hand. But it requires special attention. I'm going to set this aside for a second. The rest of these all have traditional grinding wheels on them, and they have the guards in place. So I can see here that the wheel is worn down. This is a cutoff wheel. It's a lot smaller than the disc, and whether this is still serviceable or not depends on what you're doing. If it's so small it won't get into the corner where you need to cut, then you need to replace it. Eventually it will wear down to the radius in the hub, and these are what we call type 27 wheels. So they have a raised area. There's type 100, which is just flat. I buy type 27 here at the school because I like them and that's just what I buy. But occasionally you'll see type 100 discs, and again, they're just the difference between a flat disc and a disc with a raised ridge. But I like these because when you get to that raised ridge, you know in all certainty that you've got your money's worth out of this cutoff wheel. So all of these discs, even the thicker ones, this is a 1/4 inch thick, have that raised hub. We also have flap discs in the shop. This one is brand new on this tool. This looks like sandpaper that's all been glued together, and that's basically what it is. Again, they're also of the type 27. They have that raised ridge there. Okay? So when you get your grinder out, you're going to inspect it. You're going to become familiar with how it operates. You're going to check it over to make sure it's in good working condition. I would strongly encourage you to look at the owner's manual. These manuals can be looked up right online. I have hard copies here in the school. If you have any questions, you want to kind of see how this thing works. There's a lot of different features in here that you may find useful that I personally don't find useful. And basically you want to really know what you're doing. So that having been said, let's go over some of those features. First of all, we have different trigger types. All these grinders have a trigger of some sort to turn them on and off. The Makita grinders have a large paddle. In the center of that paddle is a safety lever. So if I just pull on the paddle, nothing happens. I have to pull this little lever back in order to get the grinder to turn on and off. So that would engage it. That happens quite naturally when you're operating the grinder, okay? But the battery Makita grinders also have a large paddle, but the safety lever goes forward in order to operate it. Now this has got a battery, so it will operate, okay? So I have to flip this one forward to get it to work, and on the plug-in tool, I have to flip it backwards in order to get it to work. And they're the same manufacturer. So even within the battery grinders, the old one that I had, which is no longer in service, the little lever was backwards of what these are. So you need to be familiar with that. This Bosch grinder and most of the 4-inch, 4.5-inch Makita grinders have a tab that's on the side. That tab can be pushed forward with your thumb. If you're right-handed, it's awesome. If you're left-handed, it's totally pain in the butt. So a left-handed person would not like this grinder at all. It will lock in the forward position. A little press on the back releases it. And it should lock in the forward position. It's designed that way. If you have one that's worn out, you may want to consider replacing that. I could argue that it's safer to have it not lock forward than to lock forward, but it is designed to lock forward, so it should work as the manufacturer intended it to. The large Makita grinder, which is actually the most comfortable one in the shop to use, the handle is really small, your hand fits around it naturally. It has a trigger that you just squeeze. It has a lock that you can lock on, although I've never used that, to be honest with you. The grinder is very, very heavy, so it kind of works almost under its own weight, but yet it has enough horsepower that if you really need to bear down on it and grind, you can. But again, this is a very, very powerful tool. This is the preferred way for grinding backing bars off of AWS test plates. And I know this is pretty intimidating to a lot of folks, but again, once it's on the plate, it's very heavy at the head, it's very light back here, not much load right there, and again, it does a great job of removing really heavy material really fast, okay? And cutoff wheels can be bought for this, flat disc, the same type of discs that are available for the other one. Although currently I only have a regular 7-inch type, well, basically a type 27 wheel. The grinder material itself isn't raised up, but the aluminum hub where it threads on is. The next thing to take a look at is basically whether the grinder, how the grinder is going to be used. There are handles that screw onto these grinders. They'll go on the left side, the right side. Some of these, like the big grinder, the handle can actually be placed in the top. The handle may or may not be required for what you're doing. You might be able to do your grinding if it's light polishing. You may not need the handle. If it's in a tight corner, you may have to switch the handle from one side to the other. For space consideration on the table, I've taken the handles off most of them, just because I'm working in a tight area for the video. But again, these are in the shop, and again, they should be used whenever possible, okay? Obviously, they're intended to be switched from side to side, and they can, of course, be removed. Now, in terms of the disc, you're going to have to know what type of disc you need and when to change it. The grinding discs really come down to two primary styles. One is a rigid disc, and then the other is a flat type disc. The flat type disc will do everything the rigid disc will do, except plunge. So if I need to grind into a weld, okay, if I have a plate, I got an old scrap plate here on the burn-in table. If I needed to grind this weld out, this disc can be used to grind on edge and dig a groove. The flat disc cannot. The flat disc has a rigid backer that the flaps are glued to, and the backer is not consumable. Only the front is. So the flat disc can only be used to grind on its face, never on its edge. Okay? The cutoff wheels, and I have a new one here, okay? These are 45 thousandths of an inch thick, 045. This is a general purpose cutoff wheel. The cutoff wheels are not intended to grind, so you don't grind with these. These are already thin and dangerous relative to the other ones. So these are only to be used for a plunging type cut. So really when it comes to grinding, we have the rigid disc and the flat disc. And people, for whatever reason, seem to like the flat disc better. They're a little smoother when you're grinding. These tend to maybe want to bounce a little bit more. The flat disc will leave a softer finish, like a polish, compared to these. But honestly, these have been around for generations. They work great. They remove a lot of material. They're less expensive. And they're really the only thing that you would want to have on your grinder if you're doing a repair on a weld, okay? The flat disc is great for preparing the plate, for getting the edges clean, but it's not so great for plunging. The other thing is the flat disc is not as good at removing oxide layers. It tends to shine them up on the surface. So the mill scale that's on the steel, when you first get it, this steel is shiny, right? If you polish it, you can see the edges are a little bit shiny, even though this has been sitting around since last year. But this gray oxide layer is easier to remove with a regular grinding disc, okay? So once you've determined whether you're doing a cutoff, whether you're doing a plunge cut perhaps, which is maybe not a cut off, but just digging into something, or just grinding on the surface, and you've selected a wheel, it's time to put that wheel on the grinder. This grinder here, I've left the parts off so we can kind of see what's going on. Right now, there's nothing on this. So a wire wheel with typically threads on directly could be placed on this as is. However, for a grinding operation, we need this backing disc. So this ring right here has a raised little hub in the center, and that is designed to center the grinding wheel. The back side has an odd shaped piece. I don't even really know what to call it. It's like a circle that's been truncated on top and bottom, and that catches this area on the grinder that is kind of shaped the same. So if I put this on and I turn it, this will lock in place, and that will secure it. That allows the grinding disc, and I'll use a cutoff wheel for this example, to set on, and again it centers it in that hub. You never put a grinding disc directly on here because there's nothing keeping it on center. So that would be very dangerous. And even if you got it close to centered, it wouldn't be safe. So that piece goes on first. Then whatever it is that you're going to grind with. Since I don't have one with a cutoff wheel, I'm going to set this one up with a cutoff wheel. Now, the nut goes on the outside. I have this little tub here in the school. Okay, this is in the supply room. And that little tub has all the grinding nuts from various grinders. They just get tossed in there. The thread of these is all the same. They're all 5/8 24. But again, there's different styles of nuts, and even within the the Milwaukee grinders, there's different generations of these nuts. So this one has a side that is flat, and then a side that is raised up, okay? This nut can go on either way if the disc is thick enough that the raised section doesn't mechanically connect with that raised section here. And on the cutoff wheel, it is actually so thin that if I turn this and tighten it down, let me come around so I can see what the camera's seeing, that it really isn't tight, like there's a gap under there. And this is still quite loose, okay? And that's with this tightened all the way down, it just is not going to contact. So you have to look at the part and see which orientation this has to go to make sure it is pressing the grinding material of the disc against this large outer assembly. And in this case, it's pretty obvious because it has the raised area in the middle that metal to metal will touch in the center and it will not actually touch the disc. So again, it has to go on with this side facing down. When it does, it's immediately snug right now, and I can go ahead and tighten that up. There is a button on the back side of almost all of these, and if I hold that button down and I rotate the wheel, actually it was in the groove already, of course. I rotate it, that will pop in, it will catch, it will keep this from turning. And then I can tighten that disc down. Okay, for most operations, literally hand tight is plenty. This will get tighter as it operates. There are spanner wrenches. I have universal spanner wrenches in the shop that will go in the holes, and again, you can line this up and give it a snug. But this does not need to be torqued down really heavily, folks. This will get tightened on its own. To loosen the disc, again, you can hold this, and I'm comfortable, I'm a big guy, I'm comfortable holding this like this, but you may want to grab the grinder and the vise, okay? You want to be safe. I should mention, of course, since I haven't operated any of these are all unplugged. That's the first thing you want to do. And again, I can press up on that little button, rotate this around till it kind of finds its little way into the groove. Now it's locked up, and I can use this tool if I can get the holes lined up to loosen the disc. Okay, oftentimes you can do this by hand. This shouldn't have to be tightened down super, super tight, okay? So I'm gonna put this on, and I'll use this grinder for demonstration. So there it is. All right, we're gonna take this battery grinder right here. This has got a different type of hub. I'm gonna remove the battery so I don't accidentally set it off. And I'm going to bring this up so the camera can see. This actually has a hub that has a little handle on here. If I can get a hold of it with my fingernails. There goes the air things again. There we go. Once I lift that up, again, I can press this button on the back side, rotate this. Now this makes a clicking sound on the battery grinders. That's normal, don't freak out. When it gets to that sweet spot, again, it pops all the way in. Now it's rigid, and again, I can simply grab that and I can twist it off. There are wrench holes in there for a spanner wrench. If you need to, use it, but again, you shouldn't have to use it. And again, I can tighten this down. You'll feel it like the layers compress, and that's it, folks. That's as tight as it needs to be. Battery back on. All right. Now I've got my my 3 grinders. I've got two grinders that are corded. One that is battery powered. I've got a flap disc. I've got a regular grinding wheel. I have a cutoff wheel. In terms of general use, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gear up with my safety gear, and we're going to do some grinding. I'll kind of show you the proper way to use these, what not to do, and then we'll get you guys started, okay? Please make sure that before you grab a grinder in the shop, that the wheel is in good condition, it's not cracked, the grinder is in good condition, and if it is not the exact grinder that you used the last time, that you are familiar with how the buttons work, you know, safety latches, safety mechanisms, guards, adjustments. You want to make sure you're used to all those things before you start grinding. These things can be very, very dangerous, okay? Moving on. All right, in terms of personal protective equipment, you want your green shop coats on. You want to make sure that you don't have any loose clothing that's going to get caught in the grinder. Safety glasses and face protection are required, okay? I've also got earplugs in. The shop is really loud. Hearing protection should really be worn all the time, particularly when you're grinding. If you're in a booth or in the grinding booth, when we get that up and running, it's just extremely loud, and it's not safe. A lot of the times you'll grind with just your welding hood on. If you are doing something quick, you know, that's fine. You can take your hood and put it in grinding mode if it has a grinding mode, so it doesn't darken prematurely. Or you can set your sensitivity all the way to low, put your shade as low as it'll go, in case it does darken. And generally speaking, you know, you're going to be okay even with an entry-level welding hood. But a clear face shield is the preferred way to do any real amount of grinding. What you don't want to do is grind without face protection. About 2 years ago, I guess it is now, I was building a snow plow bucket for an excavator, or for a skid steer, a big skid steer for a buddy of mine. And we had to do a little modification on the back so that it could tip up without hitting a hydraulic line. And I had a flap disc, much like this, on a corded grinder, powered grinder. And I was in an awkward position where I had to lean down over and grind this part out this way, okay, to create just a tiny amount of clearance. Well, the disc was effectively between 2 little pockets. So if you can imagine this disc right here, and I'm grinding inside of a tight area, basically what happens is if the disc, when it's operating, it's designed to be working on the front side. And that way the pressure is pushing against the disc, and it's causing the entire assembly to self-tighten. If you grind on the back edge, which is generally impossible with the guard on, because the guard will hit first, the disc will loosen. Well, in an area like this, if I go from one side of contact to the opposite, I get that same effect. And I was leaned down over, I had my face shield on, I had my gloves on, I had all my protective equipment in an awkward position, grinding like this. And that disc caught the edge and basically exploded and cleared my face shield right off my face. It actually came up, hit the face shield right about here, and ripped it right off my head. And of course the grinder stopped because I let go of the trigger. But it happens, boom, just like that, okay? You're not gonna see it coming. So don't think that if I see something start to go wrong, I'll get my face shield on. You won't know it, and you'll be without an eye, without a cheek, without teeth, you know, something will be bad. So please always have your personal protective equipment on. All right, so I've got my gear, I'm gonna grab my gloves, and we're gonna just do some light grinding. In terms of grinding, really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be operating on the front side of the disc, okay? We want to make sure that we don't have the disc up so high that we effectively thin the edge out. You can see this grinding disc right here is you know, thinner on the front than it is on the back. That is normal to a degree, but I would keep the grinding disc as low as I can keep it and effectively use it, okay? Sometimes you have to get up on edge, sometimes you have to grind in a plunging cut. But again, you want to make sure that you keep that grinder as flat as you can while you're using it. Particularly with a flap disc, where you can actually wear the entire grinder away down to the backer, and then you just don't have real good access to the material in here because the backer doesn't get smaller like a regular grinding disc does. And you can see that this one is shrunk in diameter as we used it. The flap disc won't. You'll just basically waste the disc. So I'm going to take my handle here that I've got, and I'm going to transfer it over to this grinder. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. All right, so we've got the first grinder here. I'll just make a note that, you know, for the purposes of this video, I don't have the ventilation system on in the building. We have a recirculating vent system. It's about 85 decibels in here when it's on, so I don't have the ability right now to dub over this. As I mentioned in another video, I bought a lapel mic. I lost the receiver literally on the way from the house here. So it's brand spanking new, it's never been used, and I can't use it. So I'm not going to have the vent on for the purpose of this. I've got the garage door open behind me. It's 20 feet away, plenty of ventilation. Really, I'm basically outside. But normally we would have the ventilation system on in the shop, but I'm going to go without it for the purpose of this demonstration. Now I've got my power cord right here. We're going to plug it in. I'm going to grab my gloves. And again, I'm going to give this thing a quick inspection and make sure it's working properly, okay? So I don't ever want to take a chance of this coming apart, so I'm going to put my face shield down. And I'm going to give this a couple of taps. I'm just going to kind of hold it away from my body. You'll notice that on this particular grinder, it takes a long time to slow down. This is an old unit. Most of your newer grinders, in fact, let me grab one of the battery grinders. Most of the newer grinders will stop very quickly within a matter of a few seconds. In the shop, I generally have the plug-in grinders put away. I don't use them really much anymore. I prefer the battery grinders. They've got a lot of power in these new Milwaukees, and again, they stop quicker. So if you have an older grinder and it takes a long time to stop, you want to make sure that the wheel is below the guard. So if you set it down, it doesn't take off on you, okay? This one's vibrating a little bit, but again, it's not taking off. If that disc is above the back of the guard, that disc should not be used on that tool, okay? So, first grinder. I'm just simply going to grind to the back side of this plate, just for the experience. And when I start grinding, the thing I want to be careful of is where are the sparks going, okay? These sparks can travel quite a long way. At 10,000 RPM, the exterior speed of this is around 160 miles an hour. So I'm going on memory on that one, and I'll have to double check it. But anything coming off of this, well, it's going to be really small and not have a lot of mass. It's moving like heck. So we want to make sure that the sparks are going in the right direction. So by simply moving the grinder around, I can change the direction that the sparks are going. So I'm going to go ahead and grind. Then I want the grinder up, not too high, relatively flat, and I'm going to touch off and I'm going to put enough pressure on it to make it cut. So right there you can see that that flap disc does a great job. It leaves a really nice shiny surface. By leaving the grinder relatively flat, I get a relatively flat surface. If I angle it up, the surface will be a little more concave. So I'm going to control the direction of the sparks. I'm going to grind off this face. The sparks will go always perpendicular to the space. I'm going to let the sparks go that way, slowly towards the camera and around, just so you can see that the spark control is in fact something I have the ability to influence. So by simply turning that grinder, the sparks are going to change direction. So you want to keep track of where your ventilation tube is. If you're grinding into one, try to control the sparks towards it. If you have a door, you want to grind towards that outside. If you get a buddy next to you, you don't want to grind towards them. You never want to let the sparks go towards flammables, including yourself. Okay, even your shop coat eventually will burst into flames if you're grinding towards yourself. So keep that in mind. Let's do just a little bit more grinder. Again, grinder up. So again, I'm going to use a smooth back and forth motion. This is a comfortable height for me. It may not be for you, but make sure the grinder is at a comfortable height. You can push down on the grinder until you feel it lug down a little bit, okay? That kind of is an experience thing, but I don't want to push so hard I stop the grinder, and I don't want to barely let it touch and let it rub the part to death, okay? This is designed to be consumed. So if you're not pushing hard enough, it will simply glaze over and fill full of the material, and if we don't break this disc apart, or any of the others, we're not getting to the newer stone, the newer abrasive that is doing the cutting. We'll simply clog this, if you will, with material. So I see a lot of these discs that are glossy in appearance, and that's from students not pushing hard enough. And you're actually going to clog the disc will then get hot, it won't breathe, and the disc can explode. So light touch, first of all. Light touch, light sparks. I'm going to go for a moderate pressure. Again, there's more sparks, and now I'm going to push as hard as I think I can, and then I'll attempt to kind of stall it. Again, that's just excess load on the grinder itself, but I want you to hear the difference between those speeds. And that's another reason you need earplugs in, not earbuds. You need to be able to hear what your equipment is doing. So I can actually push this down to the point where I'll make it stop. again, that's just abusive to the tool, and it's not going to be safe for you. So moderately heavy loads will keep the wheel breaking down, accessing new parts of that grinding disc. And again, grinding is a whole technology. You can take a 40-hour course on it. But you got to use your brain here, folks, okay? It should be cutting. If you're taking forever to remove some material, you're probably not loading it enough. And I'm going to bring the camera up closer and demonstrate what I think is a normal, healthy cut rate on a brand new piece of material. All right, so we've got a brand new piece of material here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grind on this with a load rate that I feel is appropriate for general grinding. Okay? So you notice that by going back and forth quickly, I'm kind of removing material and then uncovering it and hiding it. I can kind of keep a straight line. I'm going to do the rest of this, trying to keep that straight line by going back and forth quickly. I think it's easier than full-length strokes, although I will use a full-length stroke at the end to even it up. So real quickly, I've got to grind reasonably straight. Again, just different techniques. Grinding back and forth. You'll notice that I don't have the grinder way up high. I'm keeping it as low as I can. Okay. So that is the basic technique with that flap disc. All right, we're going to switch over to a battery grinder with a conventional grinding disc. Same techniques, but it's going to feel a little different, sound a little different, okay? All right, it's not as easy to get a smooth finish. Now, this is a battery tool versus a really high horsepower electric tool, so we can't quite compare power to power. But you can see that the quality of the finish, again, it's better with the flap disc, but if you don't need that quality, then the conventional grinding disc works just as well. And of course, if I had kept the grinding done with the same tool, then the horsepower would have been the same, and again, the material removal would have been a little bit faster. So as a general rule, again, you do get better performance with a plug-in tool than with a battery tool, but these are pretty good. They're admirable. All right, let's set this back up after jiggling you around a little bit. All right, what we got now is a cutoff wheel. This is a 45 thousandths of an inch thick cutoff wheel. So I am not going to use this to grind, okay? That will thin this out and cause it to be damaged. So I'm going to rotate this over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make cuts into this wheel. Now, a couple of things to consider when using the cutoff wheel. First of all, if I'm cutting down like this, the sparks are probably going to come towards me. So I'm going to keep my body off to the side when I do that cutting, so they go under my right arm instead of directly at myself. Additionally, I'm going to have a hold of this top because this is really going to want to bounce. So I'm going to utilize this guide. And I can plunge this in and I can go back and forth. But I can't twist it while it's in the cut or I could break the wheel. So just like that, we cut all the way through. that backing bar. Again, this is a really efficient way to remove material. But again, you've got to be careful with the cutoff wheel. It is potentially dangerous. Let's cut the end of this off. So again, we made a nice clean cut at the end. If you notice the spark direction in the video, when I started the cut, the sparks were coming backwards, somewhat towards my body. I could feel them hitting me and my legs. So I brought the cut wheel the back, and again, I directed the sparks down. Let me flip this around and I'll demonstrate that again. So utilize your ability to control the direction those sparks are going so you don't set yourself or somebody else on fire. Or, you know, it may be as simple as just getting something in your eye. Okay. We'll make another cut. Now you're going to watch out for the cord. This is a corded tool. Keep it out of the way. So again, watch the direction of the sparks. Okay. Again, right there, directly towards me. So initially they're directly towards me, so I'm going to try to move the tool so the sparks go down. All right, folks, as I was making those cuts, the tool was kind of bouncing like this. That wasn't me. That's the tool trying to pull itself up out of the cut. So I want to do another demonstration. I'm going to roll the old camera right around here sideways. I'm going to do another demonstration, and what I want to show you guys is I want to show you the effect of grinding with this cutoff wheel in the wrong orientation. So I'm going to cut up top. It'll cut pretty clean. If I cut on the bottom part of the wheel, it's going to want to kick on me. So I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to stand back behind it so that if something blows, it goes up and not in my face. And again, I got my face shield on. So here we go. So cutting right here. So right there, it cut pretty good. I barely had to hold on to the tool to get it to operate. Now I'm going to cut on the top edge of the wheel. Okay. So when I cut on the wrong side of the wheel wants to climb out of the cut. On the top of the grinder, there's a directional arrow. That tells you which direction that tool is going to turn. It's on most grinders. You want to do your grinding or your cutting with the cutoff wheel especially on the side where the arrow is pointed. And that'll keep the cut in the tool. It'll actually cut and perform much better and much more safely. Okay, that having been said, in terms of a general overview of the grinders, that's where I'm going to end it for this video. The 7-inch grinder should not be used by anyone in the shop until they've been specifically trained by me, because this thing really has the capacity to do a lot of damage quickly. It is my preferred tool for a lot of small operations. If I had to grind a backing bar down like we did here, in reality we would have cut the piece first, so I would only be grinding down the part we were going to bend. But again, this grinder right here is really the correct tool for that job. And with a flap disc, it's phenomenal in terms of performance. But it is very heavy. It must weigh close to 10 pounds. And I need to know that you as a student can handle that tool. For the rest of the tools, the real big thing to keep in mind is that while you're grinding, in addition to being safe with these, you're going to make a hellacious mess. I have not had the sucker tube on because I'm just doing a demo video here, and I want to show you what I've got here, okay? Now, I haven't done any grinding other than what's been on camera. And this was all swept clean when we started. So literally we have just piles of crap and dirt and debris, okay? All that stuff is going to go right into your lungs if you're not careful when you do your grinding. So these tools are just covered. Off camera, I was knocking the debris off these before I used them because I'm grinding towards them. But really, you're creating a lot of debris. The floor, again, is covered in debris, and the entire shop will get filthy in a hurry. I think my camera's tilted, but I'm going to roll with it. So I hate grinding unless I have to. We've got a grinding booth in the shop that is not in service yet, but it hopefully will be this year. This is the fall of 2021. We just moved into this school in March of this year. So we've got to build a bench in there so we can effectively use that space, and I want a little bit better lighting. Whenever conceivably possible, you want to wear a respirator. And no, your little COVID face masks are not respiratory protection, so don't think that they are. In terms of your grinding, they're probably better than nothing at all, but they're not going to protect you from breathing this stuff in because they don't create a seal around your face. So you're basically breathing through the area of least resistance, and that's always the perimeter of the mask. A respirator, silicone mask, seals against your face, clean shaven, that's been fit for you professionally after a pulmonary function test to make sure you're not going to pass out because you've got a breathing disability you don't know about, is what should be ideally used for heavy grinding. Here in this shop, we're going to use ventilation. We've got really good ventilation in the booths. The grinding booth is specifically designed for that purpose. And of course, if you can ever do the grinding outside, that's obviously the first choice, and grind so the wind carries the sparks away if that is in fact an option. But at the end of the day, you're going to have quite a bit of mess to clean up. Make sure that the tools are properly cleaned, properly stowed. Grinding tools with cords need to be wrapped. I prefer a figure-8 pattern, so I'm just going to go around the handle and store this like so. Obviously, battery tools don't have any particular cord to wrap storage requirements, but they do have a battery. The batteries should not be charged on these tools while they're hot, and in fact, because of the number of charge cycles, I prefer it that you don't charge these at all until they die, okay? So run these batteries when the battery dies, or if it's near dying, if you press the little button and you see this 1 bar of battery life left, yeah, go throw it on the charger. But at the end of the day, if this still is showing 3 or 4 bars, then leave it right on the tool when you put it in storage, and the next person can simply grab it. So be safe, be smart, and after watching this video, we'll qualify you individually on the tools, and any further questions we'll address live in class. Thank you.